You got to put the mic through your head and out the back.
You have to put it, I think, against your vocal cords.
My forehead is super resonant, so I just put it up here.
Yeah, you got great sinuses.
That's called your melon.
like a melon-based beluga.
Yep.
Butterscotch Hey everybody, welcome to episode 86 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast of Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Adam and I'm the netter.
I'm Sam, and I'm the art man.
And today is February. Today is February 14th,
Yeah, but what
2017.
But what Wonopian day is it?
Today
It was
is,
Wikiuary yesterday.
Yeah, today's Boguary.
Today's
Happy
Boguary.
Boguary, everybody. Also, today's Valentine's Day.
Wait a second. It was
So-
Boguary last one too. Is Boguary on a 1 week?
No, last time it was Bogember.
Bogember.
And
Crap,
somebody misnamed the podcast title. Happy Boguary. So this time, I don't know who did it though. But more
It was
importantly,
probably me.
but more importantly, today's Valentine's Day. So make sure you spend some time with your loved ones.
Make sure you also spend some money on commercial goods.
Yeah. And
For
if you
Valentine's
don't,
Day.
if you
Chocolate
don't have a special someone, then happy Palentine's Day. Spend some time with your pals.
Yeah.
You know,
You're our
go out,
pals.
Go out, be single, be ready to mingle. You know,
Be ready
Just
to
do-
pal it up.
And if you're
and
off,
just pal around town.
and if you're off alone and don't have pals around either, happy Selfentine's Day.
Yeah.
Just go get some ice cream. Take care of yourself.
Happy ice cream, Netflix, and video games day.
Play some video games. Life
Yeah.
could be far worse than this.
You could. Also, warning, anything could happen on this show. There's going to be profanity and other stuff, so stop listening. Okay. What happened, you guys?
Just quit it.
We got a news piece.
A single,
I think we only have one news
solitary
piece.
drop of
One
news.
piece. We have a whole bunch of stuff happened last week, but we can't and won't talk about it.
Yeah, so don't ask us.
Except,
Shut it.
well, they have to because we told them to send questions.
Oh, right.
So-
ask us about other things.
Just ask us about other stuff. But more importantly, we got a new human in the office.
Yeah.
Yet another butterscotch arrived.
They're multiplying.
Mm-hmm.
And this time we got ourselves a Monique.
Mm-hmm.
Monique is
That's the job position.
Yeah. We don't know what her name is.
Yeah.
But that's
She does that.
We were hiring
Very well.
for a Monique.
Monique's
And got,
super good. So we had a job opening a little while back for what we're calling a studio wrangler because we realized that with what all is happening with Crashlands and all the administration that comes with having a game that a lot of people are playing, you can't actually make new games anymore.
You guys, we've been drowning.
We've been drowning in all kinds of admin stuff, and it's tax season. There's all kinds of other stuff.
Monique is supposed to be throwing us life rafts.
Yeah, she's a buoy that's going to keep us
Buoy in the
keep
ocean.
us afloat, and it'll actually allow us to go full bore on making the next game. So she just started yesterday, and she's already just crushing it. So
She prepared this podcast, Doc. So we just got to walk in here and sit down.
yeah, it's great.
pretty sweet.
So, and then I think we got GDC coming up.
Yep.
Sam's going to the Dice Awards. So there's all kinds of stuff that's we're just getting leveled by.
Yeah. I've
Waylaid.
basically just been working on
So we
talks.
so we really need the help.
Yeah, so welcome Monique to the team.
Yeah.
And I think she's working on get her bio put together. We're going to put up a thing announcing she's here on the blog. So probably by the
See her
time you listen
soon.
to this, there'll be actual announcements up, presumably.
Yeah, super pumped. And also, there's something else that happened
What else happened?
this past week. We put some dope ass fat heads on the wall.
So we got these. So I was like, that phrase was what someone, when we were asking for news around the office, someone was like, was it Andy? Was
I
like,
think it was Andy.
What about those dope ass fat heads? And we're all just like,
Yeah.
What
What about
about
Yeah.
this?
Well, even said, I think it was yesterday when somebody suggested putting them up. And I think I'd heard the term fathead 2 years ago when you got them or something, but had, fleeting. I had absolutely no recollection
so what
of what
is
that
it
was at
for
all.
everybody who doesn't know what a fat
It's a
head is?
wall sticker.
It's
Is
like
it a
vinyl.
company? It's a company.
It's a company. It's called
Okay.
Fathead. They make these vinyl wall stickery things that I don't know how they attach to the wall, but
They magic onto the wall.
they
It's
magic
literally
onto
magic.
the wall,
Yeah.
and then
You can just peel them off. It's not like a sticker. I don't know.
they don't take the paint off. They don't even stick to the wall. They just
Yeah.
are on the wall.
Yeah.
Also, they are not funding this podcast, but if they would like to, they could send us a contact request at contact.
We talk about dope ass fat heads all the time.
Yeah.
So I brought these two from when I had the first transplant. I was going to be in the hospital for a month. Our mother was like, you can't be in this boring ass hospital cell because it's an adult hospital, which means everything's beige. So
The floor is beige, the walls are beige, the ceiling is slightly off beige to
Yeah.
give it some color.
The air is even beige.
the air
Yeah.
feels beige. And then
When you breathe, you're like,
so she got
Beige.
she took some of Eric Hibbler's paintings that he had done for us about Crashlands and then about Flop Rocket. And now with Fathead, you can send them a thing that you want on the wall. And then like I don't know how they cut
They
it.
just
Same
make it.
thing. They cut it like perfectly. So we have a perfectly cut out flux on one wall. We got the crashed ship is now above the coffee maker.
Mhm.
Where's the
Pluming
Flop Rocket?
smoke
Is Flop
into the
Rocket
air.
here?
no, you got to bring your flop rocket's still somewhere floating around
Oh, God.
in your debris cloud.
All right.
So
I'm gonna search through my yeah, that's a good description for how I live my life. Like, it's just a cloud of
Live my
debris
life
behind
in
me.
a debris cloud.
yeah. So that's all. That's literally that's all that has happened that we can.
Oh no, wait.
and
There
will
was one
talk
piece
about.
of news.
Wait, what?
The Steam thing.
Oh,
Is it
green
time yet?
light.
Do we want to talk about because they
Oh,
haven't
yeah,
actually
yeah,
made
right.
a final decision about what
They
it's
haven't made a
gonna
final
be.
decision.
They're gonna
but-
do it.
But
They're
there's
gonna
some
do it.
talks, which I think it came out on Thursday or Friday that
Yeah.
Valve has decided that
I
they
knew
are
something had happened.
they're
I was
going to
like,
yeah.
discontinue Greenlight, and that's all that is known so far is that probably they're going to trade Greenlight for just having an upfront fee that you pay to publish your game.
which is the same system that is used on Google Play and iTunes.
Except on Google Play and iTunes, you pay an annual subscription to be
Instead of a
developer.
per application.
Instead of per game. Yeah.
Mhm.
Which this is the kind of thing that actually we've talked about and possibly advocated for experimenting with for the mobile market, just because it's so flooded with, like, when Flappy Bird came out, there was a new Flappy Bird clone every 20 minutes, right?
Mhm.
And each one made $0, of course, because
Right. Except for a couple of them that made
Yeah.
13.
Right, right.
And so the idea there is these platforms are commercial game platforms. And so people publish games on there and sell them. And so the idea is by throwing a small barrier up front, say like $100 or something.
but it doesn't even need to be. I mean, it can be really small. To me, this is the interesting
Yeah,
part.
if it
of
was
all
like
this is
$50 or even
Or
30
shit,
or 20.
20 even,
yeah.
you just need you need something that prevents people from just basically spamming this.
Yeah, because if somebody thinks, yeah, I'll just like throw something together in 15 minutes and put it up on Google Play or something.
Mhm.
And if they are not confident that it's going to make more than $20,
Mm-hmm.
then they are all of a sudden they have to give something up to do that, right?
Well,
So
I mean,
it cuts down.
a lot of
on those.
people, especially in the indie sphere, have been upset about this because of the notion that it's going to reduce the overall amount of diversity that you're seeing on platforms like Steam, which is interesting. They've benefited actually hugely, and they noted in their process in talking about the reducing or turning off Greenlight that well over 100 games or something like that have made over $200,000 in sales who came from Greenlight originally that they would not have gotten right.
Yeah.
Right, otherwise. So in other words, it's not that it's a bad system for the people
It might even
who
be
it should
$2
be.
million.
It was $2 million.
Yeah,
$2
it was,
million,
it was
yeah.
pretty.
2 million, yeah.
Yeah.
So the thing is, Greenlight's not a bad system for people whose games can already like be sold, if that makes
People
sense.
who are making good games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is basically what the problem is you got to figure out how to put some sort of divider in there. And before it was just the case that if you didn't have a publisher, if you didn't have a direct contact at Valve or frankly anywhere, that you just couldn't get your game put anywhere, which meant that everybody was left out in the cold. And so a lot of the response from, I think, a good portion of the indie community has been this sort of, there's the two responses. There's the one that's more like ours, which is like, yeah, a small barrier to entry seems like a good thing, because if it costs like $100, $200 to throw a game up on the store, if you don't think your game's going to get that much money back, then it shouldn't
Yeah.
go.
And
on the
I
store in
think
the first place.
the big argument against it is the issue of people who can't get that money,
Mhm.
right? Which I'm actually, I understand the concern, but at the same time, because of things like being able to find publishers, like if you have a really good thing that you made and you're putting it on a commercial platform to sell it,
You will have had to have spent at minimum hundreds of hours making that thing.
yeah, I mean,
If you can't spare another like 5 of them,
well, it's not a question of time so
Yeah.
much, I think, because like a lot of times people will have, like, if they are already struggling to get by, they may not have the extra time to try to like get some extra cash
Hustle,
or something.
yeah.
But
Although now they're done making that game that they were.
they're done
spending
making the
extra time
game,
on.
so they're freeing up time. Yeah, it's an interesting conundrum of sort of having people who somehow have a lot of time to spend making a high quality commercially viable game, but also don't have the
Somehow
time.
Well,
to
I think
to have $100.
So there's an interesting
cash.
thing though that's been happening, which is I think the reality is that I think, I don't know if it's because of the general American culture or what, but we want to think that everything is for everyone all the time. that there's like that it's pure merit based and that there's no barriers at all. The reality, of course, is that once you get into business and once you like get into your field or whatever else, is that you realize that it's not so much about merit as you once, bright-eyed assumed it was. It is much more about who you know, the connections you have, and then the capital you have behind your ideas. You can have two people who have the same great idea, but if someone has the extra couple $100 to their name, they're going to be able to do it.
Well, there's a problem with a meritocracy, which is that somebody has to evaluate merit.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. And this is one interesting point I saw when I thought was a pretty good caveat that they were pointing out is that Steam's not increasing their curation. They're just putting a paywall up. And the point the person made was like,
this isn't going to necessarily
make the games better. It's
not at all, because
it's gonna filter out the small number of sort of like joke games, basically. People who there's a game on Steam Greenlight called Gabe Newell Simulator,
right,
where it's just like a bunch of memes that somebody slapped together and then put it up on Greenlight, and everybody's like, "Ha, yeah!" and everybody votes yes, and now this is a thing on Steam, right? Which nobody would actually spend money on it, but it's a funny joke thing, right? Mm-hmm. So. Interestingly, other commercial games are competing with this thing for store space.
So I think that's the only valid criticism I've seen so far. Is their whole point. Their whole point was the store needs more curation, not necessarily, which is supposed to be a good barrier.
This not only to me, this actually isn't adding a barrier at all, because there currently is a barrier. It's called Greenlight, right? That barrier is you have to make a polished enough marketable product that you can get through,
or something with enough dank memes in it.
Right. Well, actually, and that's something that I want to circle back on also, because to me, this is solving a problem in the weirdest way possible, because they already have a solution in place that's just implemented weirdly, and they could just implement it slightly differently. But we'll come back to that.
Okay.
The main thing is if you replace a system where people have to vote for your product, meaning you have to go in some capacity, try to market a thing and put together a store page and all that kind of stuff, with one where you just get to put some money in and then have it on the market, which again is how mobile works right now, right? There actually is no barrier to entry. The barrier is that financial
$20 a year.
But that's the same. That's the same idea as saying, because again, this is a matter of like putting amounts of time into things and having access to funds, that kind of stuff. And if the amount of funds required is low enough, meaning on the order of like $100, right? Then if you can put together a polished product that is commercially viable, somehow you must also have a way to get enough money scraped together to hit that minimum threshold to get into it, right? So I don't think it's a real barrier at all, actually. And in fact, the reason that our company started was because there was no barrier, quote unquote, on mobile, because all we had to do was pay a small fee, and now we could just publish our stuff.
We didn't have to wait for a Greenlight campaign,
right?
Talfight got destroyed on Greenlight.
Yeah.
So this is actually a good point.
But rightfully it shouldn't have been on.
Which is then exactly the point. Which is actually now this is not going to I don't think this is going to remove garbage from the store at all. Mm-hmm. It's going to, I think, open the floodgates actually more to garbage. It's just going to allow people. It's going to become the equivalent of what the
it takes away the gatekeeper, right? Because the community was the gatekeeper.
Yeah. So now they would just
say, and they were occasionally insane.
And sometimes they would vote in a thing that probably they shouldn't have, like Talfight.
Interesting.
but here's the piece of that is unless I don't think this is actually, I don't think Steam, and I can't remember, I read their post about this, but I can't remember what their rationale was for why they were doing this. But there's no way it's about reducing, or about making it more difficult for people to enter the thing. It's actually, it has to be the opposite, because what they have in place right now is a system where, and we don't know the details, and if we did, we probably wouldn't be allowed to say them, of how like Greenlight works exactly.
Right.
What we do know though is that many games that we have seen because we're like looking at the numbers, trying to get a sense of this when we were doing research before we launched Crashlands and so on. Many games have many more no votes than yes votes.
Yep.
But still get through Greenlight, because what Steam was evaluating wasn't whether or not these were good products. It was whether or not people would buy them. Mm-hmm. So the idea was, presumably, if you accumulate enough yes votes, that's enough people who will buy the game that it's now worth.
And if you think about it from just like a business angle, the question that Valve must have been answering then was, are we going to make money off this game?
Yeah.
Right.
That's the question.
And so if you just bypass that question entirely and just say
guarantee money made off the game,
because you have to give us money to put it up.
Right. So at least you cover their costs.
Well, so what about this idea of so I see what you're saying. If the cost to get in is like $50 or $100 per game,
right?
What if, because the thing is the numbers that they're entertaining are between $100 and $5,000. Per game.
Yeah, so it's 5,000.
What if
that's
it's
a whole
5,000?
different?
Yeah, so exactly. If it's 5,000, that does now absolutely become a barrier to entry.
Yeah.
Because the kind of team, like a small team like ours, for example, like if we were back in the Tau Fight 2 days,
that would have been most of our money. Actually,
yeah,
it would have been almost all of our money.
Yeah. It would have been, and we actually wouldn't have been able to we wouldn't have had enough money left to launch Quadrupus Rampage. And since Tau Fight was a complete disaster,
right,
the company would have been gone at that point, right? So that's enough of a threshold to bankrupt a small company.
Yep.
And only give them one shot, because it can cost on the order, because it can't, like, a few $100, right? Is nothing compared to the cost of making a commercial product
for months and months.
For months and months.
Yeah.
A few $1,000s starts to become
that's something. That's something.
Similar,
well,
right?
especially for the whole point is that small indie teams, that's a shitload of money.
Yeah. I mean, to me,
for us,
the
would be
bigger
2
question,
months of dev time.
Yeah.
2 months. Crashlands, or I mean, Quadrupus and Tau Fight took basically
3
2.5 months
yeah.
to make.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that's a whole game that we don't get to make.
But to me, the question is, like, what is the quote unquote paywall actually do?
Mm-hmm.
Like, honestly, like, what does it do? What is its purpose? And I think that's the part that to me is just still, because it's unclear to me on the other stores as well why that's there, except just to say that it costs the company something. I remember, like,
it costs the company stuff to host those.
Yeah,
games,
these companies aren't fucking, like,
they're not charities.
They're not charities, right? They exist to make money, and more importantly, when you put something up on their service, it costs them money. They have to now maintain this thing that you have made and put up there. So there is some cost to Steam and to Valve to let us, us measly small time developers, right, put our products up on their store. So they actually are taking a risk every time they do this. And further, because you're now going into a pool where you're competing with other stuff, every time they show your game instead of somebody else's, right? They are now taking a risk on you, because people will have limited attention. They will only look at a few games before they stop looking. So if Steam's going to put yours in the queue, you'd better fucking sell that game, right? For Steam. Otherwise, and this is why they knock you out. This is why it's all algorithm based, right? If your game doesn't sell, you're going to get knocked down to the bottom of the charts, and rightly so, because you're competing for attention with everybody.
It's a feature spots are a zero sum game.
They absolutely
if
are.
You get a feature spot, nobody else has it.
Because player attention or consumer attention is a super limited resource.
Well, so this is interesting though, because in light of the Discovery update, the 2.0 they did, what they've essentially been doing is moving toward a place where that whole idea of zero sum featuring is not the case.
Right. But it still is, though, because you can only go through some number of things.
It still is, but the fact that they then augment every single person's stores according to their taste, whatever they bought before, means that there's essentially more feature spots, highly targeted, that are available. Right. So it reduces the kick out, right? Where it's like you're not replacing every single game like you are on iTunes. Yep. If you're in one of the top 5 banner spots, you're replacing.
Yeah, I mean, I think just thinking about it from if you were in Valve's position and seeing how, because of things like GameMaker, Unity, Unreal Engine, all these things, every day more and more games are being made than the day before, right? Mm-hmm. And so looking at the mobile marketplace and just how, because there are no barriers to entry, or what's there is amounting to something like barrier. Yeah, like 30 cents a day or something like that to be a developer on those platforms or less. And so because of that, you just end up with this exponentially increasing group or portfolio of games available. And a couple of years ago, the term indie-pocalypse started coming about, because people started noticing that on Steam, the rate of growth of games being published, the rate has been the same actually, but it's starting to hit a critical mass where there's enough games coming out that people are starting to feel like their games aren't going to get noticed, right?
And that's true. They can't get noticed.
Right. And so, but running the numbers on it, it basically comes out to there's the same number of highly successful games every year.
But that's an issue of featuring.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Well, exactly. It's an issue of featuring, and it's an issue of, like, there's still a bunch of quality games coming out, all that stuff. So if you assume that it's sort of like a lottery, it's kind of random basically, which is not a fair assumption necessarily, but if you just say, okay, if there's 10,000 games coming out this year, and I'm one of those, then my chance of being noticed is much lower, versus if there's 10 games coming out this year and I'm one of those.
Yeah, well, it has to do with the relationship between the number of things coming out, their relative quality, so people just being willing to buy them, and the number of, and the amount of available feature spots, marketing capacity for, because basically the thing that has happened very recently is that the games coming out on Steam have saturated Steam's marketing capacity.
Right. And so I think this is the point I was going to try to hit, which is, I don't think it's a quality barrier. I think it's just purely
throttle.
It's purely a barrier.
Yeah. It's a throttle.
Like they're trying to put up a wall.
Bit, right?
It's like a dam, right?
Yeah.
to stop the flow, because they want it to be the case that people who put games on there are serious about it. They've made
their commercial product.
Their commercial product. They've made a high quality enough thing that they can at least, for example, get a publisher who will front the barrier, the fee if the developer themselves can't do it, whatever it is. But they want people who have made good stuff and are determined to sell it.
Yep.
And that's what I think.
The thing is also,
is.
I'm sure it's going through their minds that they're not able. Steam is not going to be able to do what it wants for developers, which is to help them sell games.
If there's 100,000 of them,
if there's that many games coming, I think that's one of the interesting things. Like viewing it actually as a throttling mechanism is probably the more appropriate way to think about it, because it's not about curation. It's scarcely about keeping. Well, it is about keeping people out, but not in the sense I think people are necessarily putting on it from a money standpoint, but just as a throttle, so that
it's just how could you possibly handle that many developers?
You just can't. And I think the constant call for curation also comes down to something we talk about a lot in house, which is what do we want to be doing with our time? Because I'm sure at Valve they're not like, yeah, let's start a department with like 500 people who just have to play.
We just dig through these games,
right?
And I try to find the one out of 100.
And it reminds me of that law of something, guys. I think it's Shepard's law or something like that. Read on Wikipedia the other day. It's just 90% of everything is garbage.
Just everything.
90% of everything. If you look at just any population,
if you just
books,
pick any random book,
movies, human beings, maybe. I don't know. 90% of everything is garbage.
Dark.
And yeah, in whatever dimension you're looking at, and I think this is kind of that point, which is that it's just not the case that it's not the case that there's been so many more great games coming out on Steam. There's been so many more not good games.
I'm wondering. There's kind of an interesting. I think that there's something that they're doing outside of the fee, which is the more important thing that's going to do all the things that we're talking about, which is that they're going to require, like when you go sign up for being a developer on the platform, basically, you have to provide all your company info.
Oh yeah,
which you currently on Steam, you don't have to be a company to sell stuff on Steam. And being a company is actually
that's gonna be a huge barrier.
Like the main barrier you need.
It doesn't actually take that much to do.
It's $150.
Yeah, it doesn't take that much to do, but somebody has to be serious enough to actually go through the work of doing all that stuff, right?
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
So just by doing that alone,
that's already something.
That's already probably going to be the biggest thing. Is that is now only people who are at least supposedly approaching this thing commercially, right? I mean, as we talked about a lot, most people don't know what they're doing, and so they have really unrealistic expectations. So they'll go start a company anyway and try to sell their games that aren't very good in a saturated market. So that'll still be happening, but it'll be cut down enormously.
Maybe. I don't know. I feel like if somebody goes through the effort of making a game for a couple months, even if they're still kind of like when we were working on Tile Fight at the beginning, we had no idea we were doing it. We weren't making high quality stuff that should have been on Steam, right? But if we hit that point, we're like, okay, our game's done. And then we go to publish it. We're like, oh crap, we have to have an LLC. I don't think at that point we'd be like, well, I guess that's it then, and just walk away. Like,
right. But that's because you're taking, because this will kick out stuff like, like hobby projects and student projects, things like because there actually is the case. And we've seen this in schools that are teaching game design, right? Where your class project or your end of term project or whatever is to make a game and publish it. It's like put it up on Google Play somewhere or on Greenlight, like somewhere where there's basically no barrier to entry, and where the thing that you've made, because it's a student project, is guaranteed to not be a commercially viable thing, right? And sort of the assumption here is that these platforms exist and by their existence just give you the right to put your stuff on them, right? For whatever reason you want, right? Just for funsies, just to share with friends.
Right? Is I think the whole point is that everything is not for everyone, and I think
it's not necessarily a question of taking sides or fairness or whatever. It's that everybody has their own interests that they're trying to protect, and in this case, Valve is probably just getting utterly flooded with games, and they don't know what to do about it, understandably, and they're gonna start trying some things. Yeah. So it's an interesting situation.
We'll see what happens.
Yep. All right, let's get on to some questions.
Okay.
So these questions come from Bscotch ID users, and if you want to ask a question on the podcast, you can go to podcast.bscotch.net. Our first question of the day comes from One Dead Saint. One Dead Saint asks, have you guys thought about getting some Crashlands characters into Rocket League as some sweet antenna unlocks? Because that would be amazing.
Not only have we thought about this,
we tried.
We tried to make it happen.
Actually already tried to do
it. Turns out our potatoes are too small. We got small potatoes.
Yeah. They're like, what the fuck is Crashlands? We're like, it's a game. It's good.
Yeah.
Characters would look great on there. They're like,
Yeah, I mean we're not big enough that we would I think the position we're in is we're small enough that if we did it, we would have to demonstrate to Psionics that we could push it to our people and get a surge of interest in Rocket League or whatever from our players.
Although I don't buy that because there's not a chance in hell because they've got like Warframe and stuff, right? And
Yeah,
Warframe is enormous. But what are the like? Honestly, if Warframe sent out a newsletter to his people and was like, "Hey, you can go see our toppers in Rocket League," what's that fucking conversion rate? That's got to be basically zero.
Conversion
right?
rate between two completely
Well, no, but I mean,
vastly different games.
the conversation we had with them basically amounted to them requiring us to do a cross promo. Where
Right.
we would have to put Rocket League stuff into Crashlands,
Right, which is definitely pointless.
Yeah,
But but we
it's probably
still like,
pointless. It's probably pointless in both directions. It's just a cool thing we
absolutely is.
wanted
Yeah,
to do.
yeah,
excited about
because we've now done enough cross promo stuff ourselves within our own universe, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we know how fucking hard it is to get somebody who even is supposedly into the stuff that you do to be into more stuff that you do. Right?
Yeah.
What's our conversion rate between games now? BSID?
And the best case scenario is 8%.
That's with our own games and our
That's
own
with our own
universe.
games,
And giving you perks between
where one of those games is free.
Yeah. So if
Yeah.
instead you're just like, all it amounts to is you being like, hey, here's a thing that exists. Yeah, that's probably.
Yeah.
That's
So yeah,
probably
so
not
yeah,
good.
it's. I mean, but I still I could get the spirit. It's sort of to me it's more of like a basically just saying like we're gonna go out of our way to do something costly to us in return for you doing something costly to you. To me that's all it actually does. Although I imagine they have a marketing team that thinks this actually does something. But
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
For me, it was basically just a matter of I love Rocket League.
yeah,
I think it's a super cool game.
yep.
And I think we probably have a number of fans who also already play Rocket League.
Yeah.
And it would be super cool for them to be able to, slap a juice box on top of their Rocket League antenna
Yeah.
or something
Yeah, we mostly wanted to do it so that when we play Rocket League,
that we can drive around with juice
we can
boxes.
have it. That's literally the
That
only
was-
reason.
We're willing to do whatever.
We're like,
is
we'll give you a
needed.
3D model. We'll have it built for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, we
The
will. We
game.
will do it. But no, yeah, we tried. It didn't fly. Maybe next game.
Yeah, well, I
Maybe
guess
next
we
game
could.
we could get a Shaloke antenna topper.
Yeah, we should probably ask them what kind of cross promo they would want in the next game, so we can just build
do it
in.
in advance.
Yeah, get some
Get
Yeah,
on Rocket
yeah,
League
buddy.
level type.
So we'll see. But apparently, and this is kind of something we talked about last week about the problems of sort of like licensing IPs between games and stuff like that and studios. And it's not as easy as just kind of sending an email and being like, hey, we have this like 3D model of this character. Would you be down to put it on your antenna? Because then all of a sudden they're like, well, we got to get our lawyers in on this. And we're like, we got to get our lawyers in on this. And then it's
But on top of that, it's work for everybody.
Yeah,
Like, it's not just like you don't just put it in there.
it's
you know?
many hours of administration and planning and
I think that's interesting because, like, what if it was a slick process? I think like, it doesn't have to be.
Well, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, because we've
But it
done
is.
cross promo with fellow small indies,
Yeah.
right? And that was a
Yep,
slick.
we put
Like, we're in
uh,
Moody Dungeon. We're in Cards and Castles.
Yep, yeah. Flux has made appearances in some other games.
Yeah.
but that required them to make art assets and do all this kind of stuff to do it. It wasn't a trivial.
And we had to write up a
process.
contract.
We wrote up a contract and
But I'm saying, what if you designed a pipeline? Like, especially in Rocket League's case, where they have these toppers.
yeah, they should
Like,
have.
they
a
should
pipeline
just have
for
a
that.
pipeline.
They should
that is
just
slick.
charge $100 fee for you to put your
I would
content.
totally pay to put juice
Yeah,
boxes.
I would
Rocket
too.
League,
I would
man.
totally do it. Let's do it.
Or maybe they should have some kind of a process
Like
where
a
maybe
voting.
like a voting, the community
yeah.
votes.
Based on the
like
number
a-
of yeses. But
Yeah,
not
I don't
the
know what you would
relative
call
yeses
that,
to
but
nos.
it's an idea.
Yeah, if we pull from like the film industry when you submit a project and there's like a light,
There's like a light that has a color to it.
like a traffic
Yeah,
light.
I don't know.
What?
It's hard to say what
Like a
that would be
green
called.
light.
Maybe
Is that
like
a
a
thing?
green, like a green.
Okay.
light.
That's where it comes from.
Wait, really? That's where it comes
That's
from?
where it comes from. Yeah.
Where it comes from?
I
Because
don't.
you can get your pilot, you can get a show greenlit. Used to,
And they literally turn a green light on.
I don't know if they turn a green light on.
Okay.
I'm just saying that they just.
You can also get
God.
red lit, which is a lot more discouraging.
How incredible
It's just
would
a
that
reference
be
to traffic lights.
if you were in the
presumably.
middle of your production and they had there's just a huge floodlight in the studio,
And it suddenly turns
and
red.
then they either flip it red or green whenever they decide. It's
Sounds
the
like a
X
reality
Factor.
show.
Yeah. Like the whole thing turns green. You're like, yeah.
What if it goes yellow though? Are you like, what is this?
They're like,
are we about
slow
to
down.
Are we about to get hit by another show? Are we somewhere we're not supposed to be? Who has right of way here? Anyways, Alan Falcon asks, hey, is the BS compendium still a plan?
Maybe.
So
we're
it's
drowning. I
not
don't
a
know.
plan.
It was never a plan.
True.
It was an idea
Yeah.
that we would like to do.
Maybe.
The first phase of the BS. So for reference, the BS compendium was the idea of compiling all of our lore stuff into a single app
And probably Butterscotch ID sort of.
and have it tied to Butterscotch ID and stuff. So, ideally we could do stuff like unlock comic books if you complete a particular quest chain in a game or something
vice
like
versa.
that. Or vice versa. Like you read a comic and then one of the characters appears in one of the games. It's like, hey, buddy. And then they got quests for you. That's how literally every quest will start, by the way.
Hey, buddy.
Hey, buddy, I got a quest for you. So that's something that we've talked about in the past, and it's something we still, I would say, intend to do, but there is no plan in place.
Correct.
And so right now it's just a matter of we need to get our house in order.
Yeah.
We got a lot of stuff that we're being buried
You
by.
guys just got to cheer on Monique while she gets our chaos corralled.
Yeah. So we'll see. And we'll, if it does start to come into fruition, we will definitely be talking about it. So you'll hear about it. Our next question comes from Skagust, like August, but with a SK in front of it. So it's either Skagust or Skaugust. I don't know. Maybe it's German. Skagust says, a few podcasts ago, you mentioned a lot was learned about the genre of hack and slashes from jamming out a hack and slash game. Care to share? What did we learn?
I didn't learn anything, so this is on you guys.
Adam didn't learn anything. So what we did is
per usual.
I can't learn.
So Sam and I, we started experimenting and playing different hack and slash games and putting together a hack and slash prototype to try to see what good.
So the basic problem we found is that in games like,
Actually, we should probably ask before, what is hack and slash? What
It's
defines
sort of
that genre?
It's generally a top-down perspective, generally.
Mhm.
So kind of like all the games that we already make.
Uh-huh.
And you are a character. It's usually RPG focused. So you have like
levels and stuff.
Yeah. And your character will usually have a few abilities that they can use. And you just sort of go around and
You're like a mower.
you're like a lawnmower.
Okay, so it's
And
about
there's just
fighting hordes of things.
fighting hordes of enemies.
But it's not a bullet hell.
No.
Because
But sometimes it might kind
But
of
those are
feel
close
like it.
together.
Yeah,
Right.
So a hack and slash is typically you are more tanky and you get hit by stuff a lot. And it's through clever management of your stats as well as things like healing potions and your abilities. And that's what keeps you alive. So it's not about skillfully
And
evading
there's usually
stuff.
very limited abilities. So the best examples in this genre are something like Diablo 2.
Diablo, Torchlight.
So I guess a bullet hell is probably a lot more about evasion.
A bullet hell, well, it's more about bullets because
Well, I mean, there is that.
And
a bullet hell is really a hack and slash at range.
Right. And
Yeah,
where
that's the best way to
you're
do it.
probably a fragile character.
Yeah. And yeah, it's all about dodging. So this is the sort of basis of a hack and slash. And going into it, we were like, okay, what have we done with, because all of our games before, we've had one sort of common problem. We couldn't quite figure out what the deal was, where, we wanted to make these really unique enemies that you would fight in every single game. So in Quadrupus, for example, every single enemy does something different. In Talfight, actually, which has like 18 enemies, all of them do something completely
I
different.
think actually 29.
29,
Yeah.
Really?
Some ridiculous.
Every
enemies.
enemy has a totally unique attack.
Yeah. And in Crashlands, we did the same thing. So every single enemy has a completely different attack. So if you're fighting a Wampet, it's very different than fighting a Shirk or whatever else. And the reasoning behind this was that we wanted to keep the game world interesting, keep the player on their toes. What we did not foresee was that we essentially have a many-to-one or a one-to-many problem. What I mean by that is you can only have complexity on one side of the equation when it comes to players versus enemies. And so if the enemies are hyper complex in terms of how they approach you, where if you're fighting like 3 of them at once and they're all 3 doing completely different things most of the time.
And if you can only do a few things.
And if you're only limited to do a few things, which is the case in something like Crashlands, then even if it's the case in Crashlands where we give you a bunch of different, what feel like options for approaching those things, like flamethrowers, blowguns, whatever,
It all comes out the same.
at the end of the day, it actually has to be the same because we've put so much complexity on one side that it sort of forces
you need to be able to deal.
simple.
You need to be able to deal with anything,
Right.
Which means your toolkit has to be easily accessible, not too many skills, and needs to allow you to deal with every iteration of all the crazy stuff.
So
that's
it
going on in the
essentially
environment.
forces you to generalize.
So you have to become a very genericized character.
Right. And so a lot of people, one thing that we heard from people was the want. People have a natural want when they play RPGs to specialize, right? It's like a fun thing. I'm going to do poison damage or whatever. And then you start building in that direction. And we got this comment from people who are playing Crashlands who liked that they could do that, but then would also oftentimes follow it up with like, so I did all this, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really seem like it changed my
Like
approach.
I'm using poison now instead of fire, but
It's kind of the same.
just kind of so what?
Although, how much does this also do with the presence of multiplayer, where specialization allows
Oh,
a general strategy across the group where everybody in the group has specialized.
Yeah, so it can matter a ton. And I guess the way I think about it is if you have a single player game, there's a depth of specialization available, but it still has to cover certain bases. But if you have multiplayer, then you can actually completely silo off certain specialties from one another.
But not
so for
completely
example,
unless it's exclusively multiplayer.
right. So for example, you can have a class that like literally only has healing spells if you have a pure multiplayer game.
Right.
Which obviously would not be viable in the context of needing to kill stuff ever. So we built this hack and slash game, and we're teasing, just looking at what we built with Crashlands and a few of our other games, and then looking at Diablo. And Seth pointed out that what's the first thing you do in Diablo? You walk outside into the Bloodmoor in Diablo 2, and you punch a zombie, and it's just one zombie. This isn't like there's no hordes happening. It's just one zombie. He doesn't even do anything special. He's just like
you hit it, it hits you. You hit it, it hits you. Then it dies.
Yeah. Yep. It breaks in half. And sometimes like some money pops.
It's very anticlimactic.
And as you run around for those first like 6 levels or so, actually, that's all that happens. Like that's all the enemies do. There's the Fallen, there's the Goatmen, there's all sorts of
they all just
enemies.
Walk up to you and hit you, and you hit them and they hit you.
And so we realized, we were like, what's happening? Because it seemed like we started seeing that actually the vast majority of enemies in these hack and slash games do the same thing.
They just walk up to you and hit you.
They just hit you.
The difference is sometimes they swing slower and hit harder, and sometimes they move faster or slower.
And sometimes they take more or less damage.
Sometimes they take more or less damage.
And then occasionally, like some rough percentage of the whole population of enemies has special abilities.
Right.
Where they might use them mixed in with also walking up and hitting you in the face, or
they apply a dot to you or something.
They're at range and they're like fucking you up at range.
Or you have interesting things like there's the fallen characters in Diablo where they just walk up to you and hit you, and there's tons of them, and then they'll throw in one fallen shaman that will resurrect.
It also shoots fireballs.
It shoots fireballs at you,
right?
Yeah,
right. You can't handle those.
So it's basically the idea is there that
that's very memorable because I still remember fighting those things. So you're always trying to get after the shaman. And
exactly. Yeah. So it's actually the case that in
Yeah.
hack and slash, the vast majority of enemies that you fight, probably 95%, are just there to sort of like get in your way,
right,
and provide you with something to hit. And then you mix in these more interesting enemies that are typically ranged, that do some extra stuff. Maybe they provide an aura.
So in combo, they do something.
Yeah, and so it's all about providing the player with sort of decisions in the moment about whether to mow down the hordes or to go after the.
And actually, I think in Diablo 3, I think they made that even more generic. So I guess adding a combinatorial explosion by making it so that those sometimes things you see, where they get the special characters or special enemies with some sort of ability, seem to now be randomly applied to every kind of enemy.
Yeah.
Right. So that you can now meet an enemy of one type versus an enemy of another type that both have the same set of special skills actually, because it's a thing applied on top of the baseline.
And then you also sometimes get like enemies that are ethereal or something. They can only be
but any enemy type could be ethereal.
Exactly.
Right? So they basically made it so that there's a small number of enemy types that all do the same thing, which is either just hit you or have some sort of a range attack. And that's it. Very simple. And then they have a set of random higher level abilities that they can just apply.
Yeah, so that was, I think, the core thing we learned was that it's all about lots of enemies where almost all of them are super, super dumb.
Yeah, because
and very simple to fight.
Because what that does, is the important thing, is that lack of complexity on that end makes it such that the character can become very complex.
Right. So you can shoot those enemies with fireballs. Yeah, you can shoot with
fireballs.
With an axe,
you could have a skeleton army that attacks them. Mm-hmm. You could
an army of dumb skeletons that just walk up and hit things.
Exactly, very dumb skeletons. You could be a whirlwind barbarian. It's like the whole idea is that you can't have complexity on both sides that feels really good, at least.
Or if you do, it's got to be balanced really carefully.
Yeah, it's hard to do. I guess is probably the better point.
Yeah, and the reason that we did this was we have been really wanting to make a game where a player can specialize, and we were like, okay, we're making Quadrupus 2. We want to focus on character classes, and the first thing we did is we were like, okay, we want to revisit all the old enemies and bring them in and sort of update them. And so we started thinking about what other types of things a character could do. And we made a second character and started playing around with what abilities they would have and stuff. And their abilities always ended up being almost exactly like Tack's abilities because
they couldn't be anything else.
Yeah, with the suite of enemies we created sort of a combat ecosystem that the player had to be able to thrive in. And there's just a very particular set of skills that you need, much like Liam Neeson, right? And so, so it was good. It was a good jam.
Yeah,
we learned a lot.
So yeah, the approach now is a big batch of basically melee focused enemies that approach you slightly differently, have different swing speeds, that sort of thing. But otherwise that players get to
They basically walk up to you and hit you.
in different ways. And so we already have 3 of the character classes done. 4 of them.
4.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice.
we just don't have the 4th.
Are we going to start now that we have Monique here, who's handling, she's going to do awesome work of just taking care of all the miscellany. Because we stopped doing our Friday updates that we used to do.
I think once GDC is done, then we're
Okay.
because then like there's
Because
there's
Seth was showing us yesterday, he's been taking now daily screenshots of game progression, which so I think if we chose one every week,
yeah.
I think the key is to literally say nothing about it. Just put up the screenshot and just be like, here's
what's
here's a
happening.
little snapshot of this week in dev, right?
Yeah, I think we're once we get back from GDC, we have nothing. There's nothing on the right, and
we're just going to be making
we're
game.
we're gonna go so hard on this thing, and we're gonna see how fast we can start pumping it
It'll
up.
be like that time
Kicking it up.
when we went skiing and we all got sunburn and windburn at the same time and our faces swelled up.
Yeah, that's how intense it's gonna
Yeah.
be. Just from the action flying past.
Yeah.
We're going to, next time you
It's gonna
guys see
desiccate
us,
your skin,
our face will be unrecognizable.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be swollen lumps of red.
but you'll have a great game in your hand.
It'll be good. Next question comes from BabuTube.
That's a good one.
BabuTube says, how do you pronounce Hugo Duco? All right, well, that's answered.
Done.
Next question comes from Slepemis 120. Slepemis 120 says, so I was wondering why Talfight 2 isn't available in every country. I'm from Serbia, by the way. Thanks.
Oh yeah, so now it is.
It is now.
Sam checked the box.
We checked the box.
So
display.
literally, so for those of you who don't know how the back end of these systems work,
There's a box.
there's a box and you check it, and then it's available in your country. There are certain rules in certain countries, and so we actually we can't distribute in through Google Play in China, in Iran, like a bunch of different places.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They're literally like they have boxes there, but it's crossed out for reasons that I don't know. They don't tell you why.
They're just
So,
acknowledging that the country, it is there.
that country
Yeah,
exists.
Probably, well, I mean, I know exactly why, which is that otherwise developers spam them with requests being like, I can't find China in this list.
Mm,
And so it's
right.
like, well, put
So
it
they
there.
put
and
it
show you
there
that
and
you
then
can't.
crossed it out.
so we read this question this morning, and then
We were like, hey, why isn't it
we were
available?
like,
in Serbia?
we haven't looked at the distribution list for Talfight. I think it's 3 years,
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah.
So I just popped in there, scrolled down, went to the S section,
Check
where I found
Serbia.
Serbia, and then checked
So it's
it.
probably the case that when we launched Talfight, for whatever reason, some deal between Google and Serbia, they couldn't distribute there. And in the intervening 3 years, that box became available. So we checked it this
Yeah.
morning.
So go
Did you
knock
actually?
yourself
Did you check in Quadrupus? Is it available? Is Quadrupus
That's a good
available?
question.
Yeah.
Go ahead and ask again podcast question next week.
Remind us next week.
If you need Quadrupus, go ahead and send
Yeah.
in
If you need,
another
if you
question.
need, if you need a game on Google Play that's not available in your country, and your country is not China or Iran,
just send us a podcast
send us a
question.
podcast question.
See what we can do.
All right, next question comes from Arcarnix. Arcarnix says, what is the process from to of recording to end of upload of the podcast?
Okay, I think I understand.
And how long does it take?
So it used to take. So
let's all right. So I think the question is basically like, how do we record the podcast? And then
well, it's a
how do
full
we-
process question, right?
Yeah.
So it used to be for the first, I think, 20 episodes, we did it ourselves ish. Was it 15
more
or
than
20?
that.
Was it more than that?
Yeah.
So for the first while, it was just us. What we would do is we would all get on Skype together, and then we would Seth and I would usually be in the same room. I think we would oftentimes have the laptop, and then we'd split an earbud between the two of us.
we just sit in
nestle
Sam's
up
bed
together in a bed.
because we needed sound dampening. So
And
we
then-
sat in a bed.
and then recorded by, and Adam was on Skype, and then we would take the recordings for both of those.
We'd record separately
Yeah.
in Audacity.
and then we have to pull those together into Audacity, and then do a bunch of magic to edit them.
noise cancellation.
Yeah.
Balance levels, all that good stuff.
Because we didn't have pop filters and stuff, we'd also go through and check by hand to see who is throwing peas
Who
in
was
their mic,
popping.
and go through and like limit these things a little
Yeah,
bit.
delete some P's.
It
And
was a
then
bit of a duct
Export
tape
it. It literally
situation.
took. It was like a 3-hour editing process.
Yeah.
Okay, this is not fun, and I think it rotated between the three of us. I think I was doing it for the first bit, and then
Yeah,
I
then
think
I
you were
did it at
doing
the
it.
end.
Did
Yeah.
you ever do it?
I
Seth?
did it for a while.
You for a
Then I
while?
passed it over to
Okay.
Adam.
Yeah.
So we rotated around. So everyone sort of took the took the crux at some point.
It was educational.
It's very educational. And then we were like, why are we doing this?
Well, actually, then we got, so during that time while we were editing the podcast, we also got better gear underneath, right? So at some point we got nicer, like some of the best USB mics you can get, you know, the Rode Podcaster, which if they also want to throw money at us, we will also take that. But they currently are not.
No, they're not, but they should.
They should. Yeah. So so then we got better microphones, we got pop filters, we did all that stuff, and then made sure we were each recording separately so that it was easier to merge the tracks together and whatever. So we were doing better underneath until the audio quality actually started to get pretty good. I think probably
if you listen to
or something.
If you listen to the podcast starting from the beginning, you will hear the audio.
You hear it get better.
Yeah. We even did stuff like we were using the same mics in the first episode as we were around like the 15th episode. But we just figured out how to use them.
Right.
Like, for example, where to put them.
Have them close to your mouth.
And a lot of this was talking to Fat Bard, our sound people.
Yep.
And then finally what came from that is after editing this and being like, we're spending an ungodly amount of time per week editing
making
this podcast.
a thing that we don't sell.
Right.
Yeah.
We're like, what are we doing? And then we just sent a message to Fat Bard. We're like, could you edit this for us? He's like, yeah.
He's like, yeah, it'll take me like 20 minutes.
We're like, what? And then he did.
So now he's part of a pipeline.
Yeah. So now we prep we go through the questions, we prep it, we record here in the basement, and then we kick it over to Fat Bard, and the rest is history. You know, so
he edits it and uploads it to SoundCloud.
So yeah, word of advice would be if you can find somebody who knows how sound work and have them do the soundy parts.
Yeah, but there is a caveat there, which is that is going to cost you some money, and podcasts do not make money unless you are WNYC Studios.
Right. So,
or
you know, just think of it as a hobby or something.
It's just something you're going to have to do.
A loss leader.
Yep. But absolutely, if you're going to be recording podcast stuff, you're going to do it at home. No matter what, the most important thing is to get a good fucking microphone and a pop filter. And it doesn't you don't need to buy a $800 microphone. I think the podcasters are like,
I think those are
$200 bucks or something.
I honestly couldn't tell the difference between that thing.
Well, the Meteor mic is what we started, but the Meteor mics are much worse at like
picking up room noise.
Right. So I think the sound quality is actually the same. It's just you have to be in a really quiet space for it to work. But yes, the Meteor mics are a great bet. Those are I think
just importantly, whatever mic you get, understand how to use it well.
Get close to it.
Yeah.
Record room sounds. There's tutorials over the internet, so just look them up. But the main thing is get a decent microphone, use it properly, learn how to use Audacity, which is free, so that you can properly get rid of background noise and all that kind of stuff. And then if you can do that, if you can put up a podcast that is engaging and the sound quality is good, then you can get people to listen to it. Right. No matter how good your podcast is, if the sound quality is crap, people are not going to. It's actually one of the things that I worry about with our own podcast is that our first episode
is bad.
The audio quality is terrible, right? Yeah. So if people enter from the beginning, there's a good chance they do not continue because
that's why we sort it the other way.
Right? Well, and it is. I mean, most podcast apps also start at
most recent first,
and that's actually how most people get into podcasts. Anyway, funny, probably it's okay, but it is something to do.
Yeah, there've been a few podcasts that I've started listening to that have many episodes over 5 years.
Yeah, they all start like crap.
Yeah, and so it's funny because you started the most recent one. You're like, oh, this is good. I'm gonna go back a little ways. So you maybe go back like 50 episodes, and it's like you can kind of tell. And you go back 50 more, and it's even worse. Yep. And the content is like questionably getting weirder as you go further back. And
but there's no excuse for that anymore because this is only true for those people who don't know what they're doing and don't look into it like us.
Yeah.
Or for those that have been around for a long time, back before people had kind of established what are actually straightforward methods to do.
So if you're gonna make a legit podcast, just do your research, get an okay mic. You can get a good sounding mic like a Meteor mic for like $80.
Yep. And probably some pretty good ones for you cheaper than that if you use them properly.
Yeah, that's the caveat.
And most of that is be in a space that isn't echoey and get close to your microphone.
Yep,
that's pretty much it.
Mm-hmm. That's about it. All right, next question comes from security risk, which we should probably look into this person.
Sounds.
I don't.
Do you think this is some sort of an attack where if we read this question out loud, something will happen?
Security number,
probably some kind of a code phrase.
This would be like one of those sci-fi episodes where our listeners' brains suddenly like get switched into some new mode. Yeah,
or like when a worm crawls in your ear and starts controlling you from the inside.
Do you think maybe this is going to send a signal to the worm?
I'm thinking of the Animorphs. Security risk says, I know you guys used Perlin noise.
No, you don't.
He or she said they know that.
This is a classic hacking technique
Yeah,
of trying
get
to
fished.
pull
Trying
in
to
some
get into the
information.
code of the game.
Yeah.
I know you guys use Perl and Noise for infinite terrain generation, but what other interesting algorithms did you use when making Crashlands? See, they're digging. They're digging for they're digging for code here.
Okay, so first, we may or may not use Perl and Noise.
We may or may not. It's hard to say. Another thing we may or may not have done was we put together an automated system for generating the recipes, which is pretty cool. And we actually
talk about it.
We have a YouTube video up about it. So you should just look at it. I think it's just called Game Dev Chat Automated Crafting Systems. So if you want to know how that whole thing works, if you're like, how come this takes 8 berries? Why not 9? Just look up that video and you'll know. What else did we do that's cool in Crashlands? We did a lot of interesting stuff relating to, like, for example, we actually have it separated out where the content of the story is not coded into the game. And we can update the story stuff in real time and then send it to the, so like we could add a quest right now, today.
And you would just have it.
Which is a pretty cool thing, I think. But yeah, otherwise, basically nothing interesting happened.
I mean, it's it's one of those things with programming, right? You will go find sort of well-established good solutions like Perl and Noise to some sort of problem. Or A star for pathfinding, right? There are these, like, for particular kinds of problems, there are these general solutions out there. But for the most part, the stuff that you then have to tackle are just really weird and specific to your game, right? And as a consequence, you're inventing weird, cool stuff constantly that's on a smaller scale and not nearly as cool as the invention of Perl and Noise, for example.
I guess it's
right?
just hard to talk about, right? Because it's like,
how do you?
I made this one.
It takes a lot of context to know why it's cool.
But also at the time, you're just solving a problem, right? You're not in your brain documenting the extent to which the thing that you've just done is awesome and how generally applicable it could be.
Right.
You're mostly just trying to solve some really weird specific problem.
I will say one thing I'm excited about. This kind of bridges the gap between Crashlands and our current game project is the way the lighting system works.
Yeah.
So in Crashlands, basically, we don't have a lighting system. We have a inverted darkening system. So for example, if we want to make something red, we take the blue and the green out of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Which now it's red. Now it's red, which is weird. And
do you also add some red back in?
Nope. Okay. You can't add red. If it's already max red, you can't get any more red.
Yeah, if it's full red. But if it's not full red, do you also add some redness?
You can. No.
Okay.
I mean, if you want to
could, though.
You could, but that would require a shader.
Yeah.
But we can only take it out.
We can only take color out, which is why sometimes you'll see things in Crashlands that, like, if you bring, like, if you go into the bog, and I think if you use
is it the purple torch?
The purple torch or the green torch?
It would be a green one.
It's almost as if it's not doing anything.
Yeah.
Because there is no green in the environment. So when it's like,
it can't light anything.
Yeah.
There's nothing to bring green up. There's no green
actually,
to add
actually
to.
means all it can do is make things darker because it's pulling color out of the other channels, but there is no color in the third channel.
Right. Well, no, it's so the way it'll work is like, so when the sun sets, when it's nighttime, we do two things. One thing is we sort of like put what you could kind of think of as like a dark sheet of paper underneath your feet, but on top of the ground.
Just slide it in.
We just kind of slide it under there.
Well, you're not paying attention.
And so that's what makes the terrain look dark. And then if you have a lamp or something like that, then we sort of like punch a hole in it. And that's like a colored hole. We punch into that.
Mm-hmm.
And
does this description make you guys understand why we feel like we don't know what the fuck we're doing?
Okay. And so like when you're holding a torch, really it's like we're just like drawing a blurry circle. That's the color of your torch underneath there. So you can see the terrain through the thing. So that's how that works. But then when it comes to actually illuminating the things on the terrain, those things are sitting above that sort of dark sheet of paper.
Right. So the sheet of paper is under your feet.
The sheet of paper is slid in between the ground and all the things on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So now we have to go in and item by item.
So each of those things needs
color
to,
those.
Yeah, they need to know what color they're supposed to be glowing. And so there's a grid that exists, and the light that you're holding sort of like talks to that grid and says what color it's putting into each grid space.
Mm-hmm.
And so then if you have like an object that's sitting somewhere in the world, it just looks down at the grid below it and it's like, what color is this place? And then it will sort of override the darkness of the nighttime, and it will, like, so if nighttime brings all of its colors down, instead it's like, oh, there's a green torch, I'm gonna leave my green alone but still drop out the other ones, right?
Now it looks like it's green lit.
Now it looks like it's glowing green when really it's just not glowing red and blue. So the cool thing now is, and there was a downside to that system, which is because it's like you can have cool glowing things on the ground, right? So you have like torches and all this other stuff. But when it came to the terrain, we couldn't have cool glowing terrain because we have this dark sort of sheet of paper.
So for example,
slid over the
I
top.
remember this happened a few times actually. I think in each zone at some point I tried to make I would forget and I make some tile and I was like, oh yeah, this should glow. So it's like, we can't because we're putting a sheet of paper over it.
Yeah, I'm like, that's like, it's just going to look like a weird dark thing at night.
So lava, for example.
Yeah.
Can't do it.
Yeah. And so with this game, we're going to do a triple layer cake.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to have the ground layer. Then we're going to have that dark
sheet of paper.
That dark sheet of paper. That's the lighting system. And then on top of that, we're going to do anything that can go on the terrain that should glow. So if we have lava, for example, we can have like a glowy layer that sits on top of the darkness.
Unaffected.
That is unaffected by the lighting system. So what it means for something to be glowing in a video game context is just that it's unaffected by darkness.
Right. This is the weird part.
It just is whatever color it is, no matter what is happening around.
I think we talked last week about how he had
Because
makeup,
it's the same as Flux's eyes, right? Because Flux's eyes seem to glow.
But really,
they're actually just not dark.
They're just
not dark.
blurry white circles.
Yeah.
And at nighttime, we just don't make them darker, which makes them
they get drawn
glow.
Yeah. they don't get affected. This is what we're talking about like last week. So you're talking about, it's weird because we had to invent time. And then when you think through some of these things where you just ask the question, like, how does a seed grow? And then you get into it. And then with this, it's like, all right, we need to light things, but we can't.
But it does bear some sort of resemblance to what you see in the world, though. So think about this: like when you're indoors and you're looking at a computer screen, you're like, "This is bright," right? Then you take it outside in the sun, and you're like, "I can't see shit," right? And it's because things don't necessarily have a fixed brightness as we perceive them. It's relative to what's around them. So for us to make a glowing thing, we just don't make it darker, and now it's bright.
And put dark things around it.
Put dark things around it. Now it's bright. So yeah,
everything's a lie.
So these are the kinds of cool things that we get to stumble across and be like, huh,
that's funny.
That's really weird.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we'll probably have some more interesting tricks that come out of this for sure. This next game. All right, I think we have time for one more question. Question comes from Crazy Katana.
Is it just a sentient katana that's
local?
I think it's probably like a clown because the crazy starts with a K.
Oh, true.
And that's sort of a signature clown move.
Yeah.
So Crazy Katana says, you talked about in the last episode, the fear of community pressure defining your games. How do you guys balance informing the community of upcoming projects and creating unreasonable expectations?
It's actually a comment I made earlier is kind of in line with this, which is I said, we should start putting up our screenshots, but not say anything about it.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, so
it's finding that balance of how do we show people that we're doing something cool without giving enough information that they can be like, I want that exact thing.
Yep.
Right.
But I think you also got to manage expectation. I mean, look at No Man's Sky.
Yep.
Yeah.
You can't just put stuff up there and be like, think whatever you will about this, because sometimes.
Yeah, we got to hedge everything.
Yeah.
So I guess.
We usually just say, actually, as you've probably noticed in the podcast, this definitely won't be in the game, but here's what we're trying to do right now.
But it looks kind of cool, right?
So it's just about tempering expectations so that you can know that we're up to something cool. You can kind of watch its progress, but never be confident that we truly intend to make that thing exist.
And we try not to make promises because you never know what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And actually, we did this with a game called Captain.
Yeah.
That we started working on. We were 3 weeks in and we were like, this game's going to be super fucking cool. Yep. And then we
started the marketing push,
made a bunch of announcements about it. And then within a week, we were like, nah, I don't know about this game.
That was the weirdest because like we got coverage. This was after Quadrupus. So we ended up getting coverage on all the big mobile news sites because they were still excited. It was only like 6 weeks after Quadrupus, I think.
Quadrupus developers are already announcing their new game project.
And we had a couple of these cool gifts with
gifts.
Like the Uhawk, which is just like these fuzzy bear people who were just like freaky looking. And it was just, we had put together their faces in such a way that they sort of were
you can animate their faces.
Yeah, jiggling and sort of screaming. And that was the gift that we gave everybody was this, it just said Uhawk. And then it was this crazy looking bear face.
People were like, what is this? This is cool. I don't know.
Yeah, they're so excited. And then literally 4 days later, we were like,
let's just let this die. So we just stopped talking about it and just moved on.
I mean, it's the same thing with like Codename Brunch or some of the projects that we started talking about sort of the end of last year. And a lot of it is because we made literally no promises about what that thing was going to be, which means that and we'll never reveal whether or not the thing we're working on now was that thing we were talking about in the past, right? Because it doesn't have to be now, and it's free to evolve. And for a while, we were also talking about Quadrupus 2, right? Which is the origin of the game that we're working on right now, but
what we're working on now is not Quadrupus 2, but literally all the stuff. It's not like we were working on Quadrupus 2 for a while, killed that project and started a new thing. It just kept
we
evolving.
let the project evolve
Yeah.
and didn't use what we had said it was going to be to constrain what we were going to let it become.
Yeah, so now it's its own thing.
Will be a standalone game. It's a new thing. We
We don't
just
know what
don't
it is.
really know what it is yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, so whatever. We'll see.
Yeah.
All right, well, this has been Coffee with Butterscotch. Thank you all for listening. And again, if you want to get your questions answered on the podcast, go to podcast.bscotch.net. Get a Bscotch ID. Ask us some questions. All right, and thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.